This is the second part of our Lenten series on forgiveness. That forgiveness, it's good for the soul. Last week I introduced to you guys Iskra Lawrence, a remarkable woman who learned how to forgive herself of what she had done in her life. She was a model, if you remember, who abused her body trying to achieve the industry's perfect form. She realized that she needed to forgive herself so that she could truly live life. I started this Lenten series on forgiveness, focusing on the self-forgiveness, because it is hard for us to forgive others if we have not forgiven ourselves. Today we will look at, however, how forgiving others is good for the soul. And I would like to introduce to you another remarkable woman. Let me first tell you her story. The year was 1994. She was 22 years old. She was a student in school, and she just returned home during a break from school. Her father ran the Catholic schools in the region, and she grew up in an atmosphere of love and an atmosphere of faith. But in the matter of days, that all changed. You see, she belonged to a minority ethnic group in Rwanda known as the Tutsis. The other group was the Hutus. The president of Rwanda, who was a Hutu, worked hard to create peace. And on the way back from a peace trip, the presidential plane was shot down and he died. Within hours of that plane crash, Hutu extremists seized control and began calling for the systematic killing of all the Tutsis in the country. They did not recognize the humanity of these individual persons. Instead, they liked to call them cockroaches. There's a museum in Rwanda with a child's quote that says, "If you would have known me for who I was, you could never have killed me." Over 1 million Tutsis were killed during this genocidal slaughter. And now listen to the story of Immaculée Ilebagazi. Immaculée was with her family when the radio reports began to shout about the uprising. Her father knew that the family was in trouble, and a kind Hutu pastor lived nearby, and so Immaculée's father brought Immaculée to this man. As she went, she sensed that this would be the last time that she would see her family. The pastor took her to a secret small interior bathroom. It was just large enough to do your business, and he placed her in there with 2 other girls. Within a few hours, more girls came, so there was 8 girls in this small bathroom. It was so small that they had to take turns sitting on top of each other. Outside the house, the girls could hear gunfire, screaming, crying, jeering, and then silence. This went on for days. The men committing these murders regularly would search the house of the Hutu pastor, sensing that people were hidden inside. And the 8 girls could only listen in silence and terror as they heard the footsteps and the doors opening and closing as these men searched for them. One day, Immaculée heard a voice of someone with whom she was familiar. This voice was of a family friend. Indeed, the family looked upon this man as a second father. She looked upon this man as a second father. But this time the voice was different. There was something sinister and diabolical about it. Very close to the room where she was hidden with the 7 other girls, he heard her say that he had killed already 399 people, and he wanted that Immaculée to be the 400th. He called her by name and said, "Come, Immaculée, be my 400th." Imagine the rage. Imagine the anger. Immaculée described that it was as if her skin was burning with anger. All she could do was think about how she could get back at these people. If she got out of the bathroom, what she would do to these people. The endless possibilities cascaded through her mind. But something changed the outlook in her mind, and she began to forgive. How was she able to do that? We'll find out at the end of the homily. One of the things that every single person experiences is being hurt by others. As a child, as an adolescent, as an adult, as an old person, we all have experienced this. God gave every single one of us the ability to love. And in so doing, he gave us the ability also to do the opposite. And every time we stop living according to the dignity as children of God and begin trying to live our lives on our own terms, we bring hurt and pain. We break the commandments that we heard about in the first reading. And when we hurt someone, that person will feel anger towards us. The anger itself is not wrong. Anytime we have an injustice, we will feel anger. It's a normal part of the human emotion. Indeed, we heard in the gospel Jesus, who is sinless, having anger as he cleansed the temple. But more often than not, because of our own brokenness, our anger will turn not towards the thing or the incident, but turns towards the people who has caused the hurt in our life. We start thinking about what they must do to atone for their sins, for the pain that they has caused us. We might even allow this anger to go into a full-on rage. We might be like Immaculée and start thinking about what we would do to these people to enact our revenge. How we will make them pay for the pain that they have caused us. As I said, this is for all of us. The story that I'm using is the story of Immaculée and the great evil that she experienced in Rwanda, but certainly probably our hurts are not as horrible as what she experienced, but it's very real. It might be the sexual abuse from a family member. It might be a drunk driver that took the life of your son. Could be the immigration officer who took your father from your house. Maybe it's the false allegation levied against you that caused you to lose your job. It's the person who invaded your home and stole your valuable possessions, but worse, stole your peace of mind. It's your husband who put his work before you. It's your wife who had an affair. It can be smaller things like husband who doesn't keep the house clean, or the wife who expects the husband to do all the work, or the spouse who bought the major purchase without communicating. It could be hurtful comments, lies, lack of transparency, unwillingness to be vulnerable, to share, selfishness, pride, lack of listening. It could be all these things, and we could go on and on. And it could even be addressed to something beyond our local family unit and our own people. It could be about politics. Think about the last 6 months, the anger and hurt because of the election, maybe the past president, the current president, the mob at the White House, the passing of pro-abortion legislation, use of immigration problems as a political ploy, etc. We all have these hurts and we all have these anger. And so we all need to forgive. But why? Why do we want to forgive? Well, we forgive first for ourselves. There's an old proverb that says, if you're not willing to forgive, you better get ready to dig 2 graves. If you're not ready to forgive, you better get ready to dig 2 graves. Indeed, if we hold on to the hate and anger towards another, if we don't forgive, then there is something inside of us that becomes less free. We become stressed out. We have all this anxiety. We have trouble sleeping, and our health declines. Scientific studies have shown that people who forgive live longer, healthier, and happier lives. Moreover, when we are hurt, we slowly begin taking on the identity of the hurt. We become fearful of being hurt again, and so we avoid the hurt or the occasion or the place, the people that has caused the hurt, and we start thinking about it constantly. We become consumed with it. It becomes our identity, and our life begins to revolve around that hurt. It's almost as if that becomes our identity. When we forgive, we get rid of this identity, and we claim our identity as a son or daughter of God the Father. Another reason why we might forgive is to help others. We help others, we forgive others, and by forgiving others, we help them to release the pain and anguish that their sin and hurt has caused and left on them. After a bad decision that had a horrible outcome, many people are in the prison of their own regret. And when we forgive them for what they have done to us, then they are free to live. An example of this is something that happened in a courtroom a year and a half ago. You probably remember it. It was Brant Jean forgiving Amber Geiger, who killed his brother Jotham. We can all remember that moment, and I encourage you to go home and maybe Google or YouTube this moment and look it up, because it's a powerful example of forgiveness. You see, Brant Jean knew his identity in Jesus Christ. He knew he was a son of God, and he also knew because of that he needed for himself and for Amber to forgive her. What transpired was a testimony to the power of forgiveness and of faith. He said that he forgave her, and he said, "I love you as a person." Now, this is the woman who killed his brother Jotham. "I love you as a person, and I don't wish anything bad on you." Then he asked sincerely several times for the judge to allow him to go and give her a hug. The judge said yes, and as Jean slowly walked to the middle of the courtroom, Amber ran to him and threw her arms around him, sobbing. You could see the release. They stood there in embrace of forgiveness, and that unconditional love was so present. I'm sure the weight of the guilt and shame was partially lifted in that moment from Amber, and whenever she gets out of prison, she'll probably say that that was a moment of great change in her life. So how do we forgive? What are some steps of forgiveness? How do we forgive others? Well, I'll give you 7 steps. First, pray and bring your need to the Eucharist. We forgive because of the grace of God, so we need to go to God in prayer and ask Him for the grace to forgive. Now, a lot of times we go to God and ask God to make that other person change, to help that other person. But we need to go to God and ask God, help me to change and help me to forgive and let go of the hurt. Grant me the capacity to forgive. And every single one of us is broken and in need of healing. Every single one of us has something that we have to forgive. And so we can come to this altar, this Eucharist, as people who are broken. And we can see when the host is broken that Jesus is in solidarity with us in our hurt and our brokenness. Then, when we are one with Him in the Holy Eucharist, He can give us that strength and that healing that can allow us to forgive. Next, allow God to forgive you. Some might think, but Father, why would I need to ask God to forgive me so that I can forgive someone else? Well, you know, it's human tendency to transfer our thinking and our thoughts to someone else. Remember the verse in the Bible when Jesus said, take the beam out of your own eye before you try to find the splinter in the other, right? Think of that man in prayer in the temple that Jesus says as a parable where he said, oh God, I'm so glad I'm not like that tax collector who was praying next to him. He wasn't able to see his own beam in his own eye. The reality is, faced with the truth, each of us need to be forgiven first so that we can forgive. Number 3, empathize. One helpful technique to forgive others is to see what they have gone through and try to understand their own perspective. Sometimes people are unaware of their own behaviors. They're unaware of how their own background and family life has influenced how they relate to others. And it may hurt other people. This does not excuse their sin, but it helps to explain why. And when we understand why, then we can more quickly forgive someone. Think of Jesus on the cross when He looked at the people who put Him up there. When He looked upon the people who were bystanders and just allowed them to, all this to happen to Him, He looked upon them and He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they have done. When we put ourselves in the shoes of another, it can help us to forgive. Be realists and not idealists. This is number 4. Oftentimes, we need to assess our own thought of, or our own expectation of the moral life of the other person. For instance, if it is our expectation that a 3-year-old, a toddler, would be able to keep his or her room perfectly clean, guess what? You're going to be angry a lot. Sometimes newlyweds have this idea that they are going to change the other person. That person's going to change for them. And they'll find in their marriage over and over again, they get angry at that one part that they have expected their spouse to change. And guess what? They're not. Not because you are going to make them change. If we are real and not idealists, we'll understand where a person's at and we'll place our expectations accordingly. And therefore, oftentimes we'll be hurt less. It's number 5, it's okay to be angry. Jesus teaches us this in today's gospel when He cleanses the temple. Anger comes, it's a natural human emotion, and it comes to us whenever we experience an injustice. Anger is not a sin. Anger is not a sin. If we think it's a sin, then we'll repress the anger, and then it will metamorphosize into one of its uglier cousins: discontent, bitterment, or grudge holding. No, we don't want to suppress it. Instead, we want to express it, but express it in a way that is healthy. And when you are angry and you're aware that you're angry and you express it in a healthy way, then you can forgive much more quickly. Number 6, talk it over with someone, and then claim it. It can be very helpful to be able to talk it over with one person, whatever has caused you anger. Now, don't talk it over with the whole town, but talk it over with one person to be able to understand it, see it, experience it. And then after talking with that person, then you can claim forgiveness and you can ask the grace of God to help you forgive that person. And maybe even that person you're talking to can help pray for you to forgive that person. Think about what therapy and counseling is. Most of it is just reflective listening. And so sharing about it can help heal. And number 7, remember forgiveness is a process. Jesus was asked in the Bible, how many times am I supposed to forgive? 7? And he responded, no, I tell you 77 times. What does that mean? It means the 7 is a number, the perfect number. And so what was being asked Jesus is, am I to forgive 7 the perfect number of times? And Jesus said, no, you're to forgive more perfectly the perfect number of times. What is he saying? He's saying it's a process. Begin it, yes. Claim it. Say, I forgive this person, but be understandable, let it be understood that it's going to take time. And you might have to revisit that and say, you know what, I claim it again. You might have to do it every day for 9 days. You might have to do it every month. But eventually you're going to peel it back to the place of hurt, and you're going to be able to say, I have forgiven, when you have accepted and you have allowed God to heal that place. So these are 7 healthy tips to be able to forgive. These will be on our website so you can look at it, understand it. Now back to Immaculée. So how did Immaculée Gaza forgive? In that small bathroom with 7 other girls immersed in fear and anxiety, Immaculée began to feel anger and hate. She began to imagine what she would do when she met these people that has caused so much suffering and hurt, these people who murdered those closest to her in life, murdered her family, caused her to be in that little closet. She began to make plans on in what ways she would seek revenge once she got out of hiding. While imagining the evil violence that she would wreak on these people, suddenly grace entered her life. She realized that this hatred was what had consumed her country and had led to the 1 million people that had died. It was a type of sickness that if she kept those feelings to her, that it would consume her. And she realized that if she kept fantasizing and feeling that anger and hate and revenge, that this sickness would only become much more pronounced. She would become sicker. She needed to go another way. One day when she prayed the rosary, she prayed the Lord's Prayer, and she got stuck on it. The place in the Lord's Prayer where it said, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And Immaculée suddenly realized that she wasn't doing that, and she just couldn't by her own power. And there in the bathroom, she asked God for help, and she prayed, God, help me to forgive. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they have done. And she felt in that bathroom with those other girls, she felt a weight lifted off her soul. Later, after the 91 days of her time in that bathroom, she left the house free and at peace. Free to move about, but at peace from the hate. In the weeks and months to come, she took inspiration from Martin Luther King Jr. and Mother Teresa and Gandhi. And she began imagining each of the people that had murdered her family and friends, and she began forgiving them one by one. Finally, she knew she needed to personally do that. And she went to the jail cell to confront the person whom she had looked up to as her second father, the person she had heard call her name when she was in the bathroom, the person who wanted to kill her as he had killed most of her family. She instantly recognized that he had no idea what he had done, and she felt such compassion for him. She forgave him in that jail cell on that day. Years later, while doing a documentary on Immaculée, a reporter joined her for a walk to the places of her childhood. They went to her village where she grew up, and even to the house where she had been hiding. And on the way, she saw a man and quickly told the photographer and the reporter, come quickly, take a photo of me with this man. This is the brother of the man who killed my family. It's okay, as she put her arm around the man. It was okay because Immaculée had forgiven him and his family. Immaculée would be the first to say to us that if she was able to forgive, then we too can forgive as well.